Joining me now, I have criminal defense attorneys Melaney LaGrone and David A. Katz. David, I'd like to start with you first, if I could, please, because I understand you are a former prosecutor. Talk to us about the video that you just watched and the body cam video of when he went and found the victim in the vehicle.
Well, the video was very compelling. You know, it's like in the George Floyd case and all these other cases where you now have a video. When I was a federal prosecutor, we normally didn't have the luxury of being able to actually show, what had happened. But in these violent crime cases, just like in the Floyd case, I mean, you can believe your eyes. You can see it for yourself. So I think that, my view on this case is it's really a tragedy. This woman obviously felt very scorned, very angry. She admitted that she was the perpetrator, and she didn't really seem to have much of a plan, although she had a plan to premeditate it. She didn't seem to have a plan to cover it up or to get away with it. And I think part of it might have been her psychology, that she wanted the world to know what she'd done. She wanted her husband and that woman to know that she was wronged in what she's done. And, a kind of, in her mind, maybe moral or ethical justice. But of course, it's totally legally wrong. And I think that although the defense has tried to portray her in a sympathetic way, and I think her defense attorney was effective, I think that this may go very badly for her when the jury comes back.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Melaney, let me ask you this. In terms of that video, the thing I noticed, other than finding the victim in the vehicle, is that it shows you what the surroundings are like, and that it was a driveway in an apartment complex. And I felt like watching that, a person to get to her in her truck would need to be, it wouldn't just be a crime of opportunity, right? It wouldn't be that there are 100 cars passing by and somebody chose to hurt this person, but rather a more deliberate had to get there. Do you have any impressions of that and the scene around the vehicle?
Judge Ashley, as a former police officer, that's something that I looked at, the fact that it was kind of secluded. So you could tell where someone would have to know where they're going. It wouldn't be just a random area. And it did, you could tell by the scene that it was closed. It was more closed off, the apartment complex. And so you wouldn't be there just out of, randomness. You would be in that area for a specific purpose.
Right. I had the same impression when I watched that. Now, a lieutenant at the crime scene gets some information that leads him to the defendant.
I spoke with a witness that was standing near the truck, and he explained or described a vehicle that had left the scene as a silver Cadillac.
All right, Michelle Boat leaves the scene of the crime and the police follow. You will see the moment when officers arrive at Michelle Boat's home up next here on Court TV Live after this short break. Welcome back to Court TV Live. Honored to be with you. I'm Judge Ashley Willcott. We are continuing to break down exactly what happened in Iowa versus Michelle Boat and the evidence that's been presented. Lieutenant Shane Cox and Brian Biggett arrived at Michelle Boat's home just moments after the murder of the victim, in this case, Tracy Mondaba. After receiving a tip from an eyewitness at the scene, the two officers took off to Boat's residence. Let's take a look at the lieutenants as they arrive on the scene.
What did you say you wanted? I don't. Is that hood warm, Brian?
Rotors are hot.
Huh?
Rotors are hot.
Okay. Pel 83. Fella, get in Zerker and find a phone number for Michelle Boat and call her and see if you can get her to answer. Nobody's coming to the door. The rotors on the Cadillac are still hot, but nobody's coming to the door. I can see through most of the house and don't see anybody.
83 from 85. Do you need me down there or do you want to stand in here?
Why don't you stay there and see if 77 needs help talking to any of the neighbors. I got 63-8 with me. We should be good.
10-4.
There's a light on. I guess it's a bedroom or something.
Yeah, that's. I guess that the curtain over here is askewed. That's what I heard something.
She's on answering at 83.
Tablet. I think she's in this bathroom back here. I can see a little bit of movement, but I can't. The blinds are pulled. Yeah. Coming?
83, I just confirmed with Marion County, they have the same number. So the number she was with.
Yes, I was in the shower. What do you need?
Oh,
And in court, Lieutenant Cox testifies to what happened the moments after the body cam was turned off.
I first asked Miss Boat to step out onto the front porch and then quickly realized she was in a robe and said, well, basically, since you're in a robe, do you mind if we step in and talk with you? And she invited us into the residence.
Officer, if I use the term that you cleared the house, what does that mean?
Basically to do a cursory search of the house as far as making sure that there isn't somebody hiding in the residence that could do us harm, or it's an officer safety type thing that when you enter a residence and especially under these circumstances, I went through the house and made sure that there wasn't anybody else in the residence.
Did anything stand out to you when you cleared the house?
So it had a finished basement, so I went down to clear the basement, and I believe at that time Lieutenant Bigowet and Miss Boat were in the kitchen. I went downstairs and there was a storage area that was fairly long, and I could hear something from the back of the room. It was pretty dark. I had my flashlight. I made a couple announcements, police department, if you're back there, come out. And nobody came out, so I continued forward, and once I reached the back of that area, I realized that the washing machine was running back there in the corner.
Still with me, criminal defense attorneys Melaney LaGrone and David A. Katz. David, let me start with you if I could. All right, the police knock. We've got a good friend who lives in the neighborhood who is law enforcement. When he knocks on our door, the entire family knows it's him because the police knock is different than most neighbors knock. Police knock, nothing, 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 another police knock. Is there any way in closing argument the state could argue, listen, she heard the police knock and then she jumped in the shower, she hid evidence and then came back to the door after a little bit?
Well, Judge, they could very much argue that this was consciousness of guilt, that this was part of her overall pattern. As I said before, she didn't seem to have much of a plan really to get away with it. But having the police knock on your door and you know they're there after you, some things occurred to her in the moment, like maybe to wash some clothing, maybe to wash herself off, maybe to have an excuse while she was hiding stuff, why she wasn't answering the door. That may have all been a ruse, that she was taking a shower or had a reason to be in the bathroom. But the evidence, as I said before, just seems pretty overwhelming in her case regarding her plan, regarding her stalking or hunting the girlfriend over at the fast food store. And I think that the police conduct here, from what I've heard so far, I imagine there would have been some search warrant motions if there had not been proper searches or if they needed a warrant. But I defer to your police officer, but it sounds based on my prosecutorial experience like so far they haven't violated her rights. This seems like this was pretty good police work.
Oh, thank you. That's great insight about how their police work was when they didn't have a warrant at this point in time, as far as we know. After the break, we will talk about the state's attempt to prove Michelle Boat intended to murder Tracy Mondabaugh. That's next on Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Hey.
When I arrived, her purse was on the ground with items strewn about. There was a lot of blood and hair inside of the maroon F-150, along with a Burger King cup underneath the truck a little ways, and the tip of a blue latex glove a short distance away from Tracy's body.
Thank you for joining us on Court TV Live. I'm Judge Ashley Willcott. That was Special Agent Elizabeth Miller that you just heard. She testified to the collection of evidence at the crime scene, but the state also introduced surveillance video evidence during her testimony. Now, the state wants to prove that the jury, to the jury that Michelle Boat's fatal stabbing of Tracy Mondabaugh was premeditated. Miller testified to Boat stalking Tracy throughout the day before following her home.
And Your Honor, for the sake of the record, permission to read Exhibit 10?
Go ahead. Stipulation 10.
Yes, I'm sorry. Stipulation 10, the parties stipulate that Exhibit 77 is not a continuous video, it's motion activated. Now, ma'am, you talked about that this was not a continuous shooting video. It causes motion to have to trigger. But the time in which Miss Boat actually pauses to let distance be between her
Objection. Leaving. Overruled. I'll have you start over, Mr. Bowles, so that we can understand any eventual answer.
Ma'am, this video accurately captures the pause the defendant makes before leaving that area of Vermeer, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, permission to read Exhibit 6, I'm sorry, I did it again, Your Honor, Stipulation 6 and Stipulation 5.
Go ahead.
Stipulation number 6. The parties stipulate and agree that Nick Boat returned to work shortly after 8:08 p.m. from taking his evening dinner break. Stipulation 5 is that the parties stipulate and agree that both Tracy Mondabal and Michelle Boat leave the Vermeer parking lot on May 18, 2020 at 8:09 p.m. Ma'am, what's the next video we're going to see?
It's the last video from the Vermeer manufacturing lot of both the F-150 and the silver Cadillac leaving the lot.
And are they in fact leaving from the same turn-in that they entered from?
Yes.
Ma'am, were there other people located in the parking lots of Burger King and Culver that were visible?
Yes, there were other people in that parking lot.
Are there other people who could potentially come and go from the Vermeer lot based on the videos that you've seen?
Yes.
I want to bring back in criminal defense attorneys Melaney LaGrone and David A. Katz. Melaney, I'd love to start with you and pick your brain as a former police officer. When you saw the video of the work parking lot, lots of warehouses, big parking lot, her following the victim in, following the victim out, what did you think in terms of law enforcement and looking at a surveillance video like that?
Well, it definitely looks like that she is intentional in following her. But then you have to think about, okay, the reason why she's following her. Is she following her just because she's, obsessed and she just wants to know what her, I think, daily life is like and how often does she see her husband and things like that? Or is she following her because she's trying to figure out her opportunity to actually kill her to make this premeditated?
All right. And David, talk to us about no contact orders, because we know there was a no contact order in place when she was seen going onto the work property where the husband worked, and the no contact order was as to her husband.
Well, these have become very frequent, even more so than when I was a prosecutor, federal prosecutor here. But of course, they're very frequent. People get them very often in these kind of domestic dispute cases. The two of them had been separated some months before this incident. And as you said, the ex-wife or the separated wife kept this calendar of every day her husband was away, which also goes into the premeditation, plus the various implements that she had, kept for what the prosecution's going to say, exactly her premeditated purpose. So I think that when you add all of this together, it just ends up looking like a very bad case for her, and she might actually be convicted of premeditated murder with malice aforethought. Might actually happen in this case.
Yeah, and there's no contact orders. There's a reason for them. They're the right thing to do. But I think sometimes people forget that it's only as good as the paper it's written on. So if you have an individual who chooses to violate it, then they're going to do that. Just quickly, David, was there anything else you noticed in that video in the last 30 seconds that we have?
Well, it would have to be zealously enforced, obviously, any kind of protection order. And that's the problem. You're right. Sometimes people don't take them seriously. Sometimes some people kind of invite more contact. We've always had these cases where they get the restraining order, and then the person who got the restraining order doesn't want to be restrained. They want to be in contact, and before you know it, it all starts up again. And then everyone's claiming that they violated the contact order, and the other person violated the contact order. But I think in general, this case is going to come to a conclusion pretty soon. And with all of these videotapes, it's amazing. It's like a fictional TV show, but it's real.
Then let me stop you there. Melaney, thank you so much for joining us. Up next, you'll get the latest updates on the jealous wife murder trial and new information in the George Floyd murder case here on Court TV Live.